Hello YouTube, Sharps1874 here, and today I've moved to the reloading bench. Why? Because it's getting to be winter time. It's getting cold outside. Not as much range time, and there's a lot of brass that I've collected. So let's just look at some of it. That gives you an idea of what I've got to do this winter. So, let's do some reloading. Okay, today we have the story of the two bullets, or the two cartridges. So I've got some, everything's 30-06 brass here. This is some military Greek surplus brass, and this is some, let's just mark Winchester 30-06. There's a slight difference in what you have to do with these. So this is the first step. This is sizing. That's what we're going to talk about today. What to do when you're sizing and what needs to be done. So with 30-06 brass, really there's not a whole lot that needs to be done. Into the press. They've already been lubed. I like to use this. I'll put some lube on. I'll spread it with my putty knife. Get a nice even coat. Get a nice thin layer of lube on there. Well, you know what? Since we've got this out, we're going to put the primer in right now. All right, primer's in. And if this was just regular brass, I would just put it over here into my tray. I turn it upside down so I can check with my finger to make sure everything is seated. But there's an intermediate step with brass like 308 brass and 30-06 brass. I take my sizing gauge. I will drop my brass in there and make sure that it's flush on the top and is within spec on the bottom. Here we go. There's a, and if it is, then it goes in the tray. Well, now we're going to take one of these Greek military surplus pieces of brass. We're going to do the same thing. Put it in. It's now sized. I've extracted the spent primer. Come down, we'll seat the new primer, and it doesn't want to go. Any surprises there? No, no surprises there at all. Because if you can just make that out, there are 3 crimps. So the first thing I've got to do is make this, get rid of the crimp, make this so it is compatible for the primer. Now, if I was doing a lot of these, I have a jig that I've set up, and I've got another video that shows how to do that. But basically, I'm just going to take my burring tool, get rid of those 3 crimps. It doesn't take much. Check the hole. The hole is good, and you can see that I've just, right there, you can see that I've just put a little bit of a bevel on there. So now we'll put it back in, and the primer drops in there just fine. Put it in the gauge, and it does not sit flush. It sticks up slightly. Okay, what's that all about? Well, that's what this is for. Sometimes when you fire your round, you might get a little bit of a burr, and this has a little burr right there. I can feel it with my fingernail. So I'm just going to take it, just really quickly take a really light filing to it, just to get rid of that burr. Then it drops right into the gauge, and it is within spec. Probably the next time I size this, it'll be a little bit too long and I'll have to trim it to length. I've got a video on that as well. So we're going to do another one of these. I know this is going to have a crimp, so I'll just take care of this right now. I wish we could get a good shot of that crimp. But this is staked in 3 places. I guess it's actually a stake instead of a crimp. But if you look at it, boom. There's the stake right there. And there's one here. Looks like there's 3 stakes to hold the primer in. So, boom. Yeah. Put the lube back on it. Size. Same. Just does not go down all the way. So, no problem. We'll check it. Yeah, there's a nasty burr right there. The surplus Greek ammo was a killer deal through CMP, so I couldn't pass it up. Life's good. Yep. And we'll go back to a regular Winchester. Oh, look at that. I am out. And these, of course, you don't need to get rid of the burr because there isn't one. Engage it. Gauge is just fine. And so this is what I'll be doing for the next little while. Okay, that's the sizing operation. Okay, let's talk about why we need to trim. For the inexperienced reloader, so this is a brand new piece of brass, never been fired before. It does have a primer in it. When you drop this in the gauge, it is absolutely flush right here and flush on this side. Okay. Here is a once fired piece of Springfield brass. Let's get that. The lighting is, there we go. Drop this in. Same, it's flush on the bottom and flush on the top. It's a perfect piece of brass. Well, I'm now going to put this through, put some lube on it. And I'm now going to put this through the sizing die. The sizing die is going to make everything around. The body of the cartridge will have expanded. When we push it back into the right size, it has to go someplace, and so it grows. So put it in. I'm not going to put the primer in on this one just yet. Okay, so this has been sized now. When we put this in, it will be just ever so slightly longer on the top. And every time you size it, it will keep getting longer and longer. Let's see if we can check that out with calipers. Okay, so the before is 2 inches 483. Oop, put on some lube. And the after is 2 inches 490. So it grew a few thousandths. And when you drop that into the gauge, oh, if you don't drop it, I've found that if you drop it, it doesn't go into the gauge. That was a joke. And so, yeah, you can see that this is just not flush. It's 7 thousandths longer. Every time you go through a sizing process, it's going to grow. Eventually, it'll grow large enough that you need to do something about it, in which case you trim it to length. So, there's the sizing operation. I've separated mine out. These are regular 30-06 brass. These are military surplus. I'm going to have to do something with the primer pocket. So that will give me, I'll keep me going for the next half hour or so, and life will be grand. Okay, there's a quick how-to on sizing and gauging. If you have any questions, please always read, follow, and understand your reloading information. Make sure you know what you're doing. You don't want to mess up, especially when you're reloading. So, there's some 30-06 sizing. I'm Sharps 1874. I thought you might like to know.